Hello to Rob Jones and your Restless Dream. How are you this lovely Tuesday morning?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Good. A little tired at the moment, very, very busy. Um, but glad to be busy. And otherwise fine. No major illnesses, no personal tragedies. Sun's out, got a cup of coffee. It's all good.
All is, all is good. Um, can you tell me how did the Restless Dream part come about?
Yeah, a really good question. Do you mean in terms of why is it called that, or how did the I find the band, or a bit of both?
Yeah, a bit of both. Yeah.
Bit of both. Okay. Well, I found them because before I started writing and releasing my own music, I've been a sort of a semi-professional musician for most of my life. I was an English secondary school teacher, but alongside that, I was a gigging guitarist and singer, playing corporate events, weddings, all of that sort of business. And so when I came to start writing my own stuff and I needed a band, luckily for me, I already knew some unbelievable musicians in the Manchester music scene, many of whom I'd played with for a long time. So the drummer and the guitarist in the Restless Dream, they're old friends of mine. We've been playing music together since we were about 16. And the other lads are sort of people that they've met and I've met through Manchester music. And so it was great, really. I just got to invite these fantastic players into the studio and onto these gigs with me. And I'm very, very fortunate in that they seem to be willing to help me out and help bring the songs to life. And in terms of the name, I think I've always, for some reason, been drawn to those band names where it's somebody in the somethings. I don't really know why. I've always just thought it had quite a nice ring to it. And it makes it sound a little less lonely than just Rob Jones. I think I've got a very generic name. You know what I mean? There are millions of people called Rob Jones. So I guess I thought I could either come up with a stage name and change my name, or I could tack something on to at least give it a little bit of individuality. So I went for the Restless Dream in many ways because it's kind of a poetic and alliterative phrase, and I'm a bit of a fan of language, but also because it does encapsulate my thoughts and feelings on this whole thing. The idea that writing, releasing my own stuff has been a bit of a dream that won't leave me alone, and so I've I've had to get after it.
So, can you tell me more about your debut EP called Castles? What's that
Yeah,
all
of
about?
course. Well, it was written a hell of a long time ago. I think I started writing those songs, possibly even pre-COVID, but definitely some of them during COVID. And they were my first attempts at writing, I guess, after a long, long break. I used to write a lot when I was young and then sort of gave up on it. So it was me coming back to songwriting. And I suppose some of the themes that I found myself exploring on that EP were things like the cyclical nature of modern life, a sort of a disappointing sideways look on love. The last song on the EP, Enough, is all about social media and kind of the thirst for fame that people seem to have. So I threw these songs together, and then the world shut down during the pandemic. So there was no real way of getting into the studio to record them, unfortunately. So what I managed to do was I found a producer, a guy called Johnny Batchelor, who works in Salford in Manchester, very talented guy. And he got me and the rest of the band to kind of record bits and pieces at home and sort of fire them into him over the internet while the studio couldn't be open because of COVID. And so it was all kind of brought together at a bit of a distance, which made it a very slow process. But I was really, really pleased with the EP and how it came out. I thought it spoke well to a debut EP. Hopefully, it showed people that there's something to be seen here, bit of potential. And it's the beginnings of the sound of the band coming together, which I think is great.
So, can you tell me about your single that released on June the 2nd called Ballerina? What's that all
Yeah,
about?
right. Good question, because I don't really know. I think the song is definitely, in some sense, about waiting for a girl. God knows I've not met her. If I had, I wouldn't be waiting. But there's that sense of unrequited love to it. Um, there are themes in the lyrics about hesitation and dissatisfaction, but also I think there's some nice visual poetry to the lyrics. It's possibly a little wordier and less literal than some of my other stuff, but I think there's a space for that. Also, it's just a catchy chorus, you know, rhyming ballerina with concertina is is something I'm pretty proud of. It's not a rhyme that you'd hear every day. I kind of quite like it. So I suppose I wanted to write a fun, upbeat tune. I was listening to Bruce Hornsby and the Range a lot. I don't know if you, the guy that wrote The Way It Is and Mandolin Rain, and I just wanted to find something with that big kind of carnivalesque tinkling piano sound. And I remember coming up with the riff first, just at home, playing around on the computer with the keyboard, and then sort of built a song around that. And so, yeah, it became the first tune on the EP. Not because it was written before all the others. I'd written quite a lot of songs for this second EP, most of which haven't made it on. But I thought it'd be a good lead single to go with at the sort of the beginnings of summer, because it's got that sunshine to it, and it's nice and hopefully radio friendly and something to catch people's eye. And yeah, it's streaming really, really well. It's just about to hit 10,000 streams on Spotify. So it's all good.
It's a song that's, as soon as I first heard it, that's a song that, or track, like, stuck in my head. If it's constantly on play, that song, on
That's great.
Spotify.
I'm really glad to hear that, man. I really, really appreciate it. That's what I hoped, and that's why I chose it for the lead single. I thought it had that kind of earwormy characteristic to it.
Can you tell me more about your single that you're releasing, July 21st, Cut So Deep? What's that all about?
Right. So very different style of song. Although I like to think there's some continuity in terms of the sound of the band. You know, you've still got that great Chris Hillman pedal steel guitar in the background. You've got the piano part Danny Wellens plays so well on both of them. You've got Dan Catterall's guitar parts. So similar style, but very different type of song. This is definitely a heartbreak ballad. But I hope it's not kind of a cliched heartbreak ballad in the traditional sense. It's not kind of, oh, a woman's left me, I'm so sad. It's slightly different. It's a song about a person kind of coming to terms with the idea that love can hurt, almost like it's a bit of a surprise that he never really considered until it was too late. It was inspired by a breakup that I actually went through in real life. And a little like in the song, you know, I suppose it took me a while to really feel the pain of it. I think often when a relationship ends, there are so many thoughts and feelings floating about that you need a little bit of distance and separation before you can bring them into real focus. That was certainly the case for me. At the beginning, I kind of felt strangely relieved, maybe a little concerned about the other person. And then it was months down the line where it sort of began to set in that, you know, this thing that you'd put so much of you into and that had meant so much to you was over. And so the song tries to capture that.
So, can you tell me more about the rest of the songs on your second EP called Trees on the 22nd of August?
Yeah, thanks for plugging these, mate. I really appreciate it. So there's two other tunes on the EP. One of them is called The Heart of the Storm. One of them is called Caroline. And they are both very much West Coast, Laurel Canyon rock inspired. I reckon fans of Jackson Browne, fans of the Eagles, fans of Neil Young will be into them. Nice kind of rolling, driving rhythm sections with piano riffs, guitar parts, and hopefully a couple of catchy choruses. And both of them thematically, I suppose, are sort of vaguely similar. Heart of the Storm, I think, is closer to Ballerina in terms of what it's about. It's about maybe a relationship that you know is never going to be the real thing, and that you're sort of happy to let come and go. In fact, that's the lyric in the chorus. In the heart of the storm, I'll leave the back light on. You can come in from the cold, and in the morning when you leave, I'll try not to feel aggrieved. So it's about this idea that maybe it's one of those people who, in an ideal world, you might love to be yours, but deep down, you know, probably never is going to be, and that's just the way it is. And then Caroline is maybe slightly more optimistic in terms of love. It's just about kind of escaping from life, I think, and going and finding somewhere quiet to be with the person that you want to be with, and just kind of settling into the isolation and escaping the real world a little bit. So now that you've got me talking about it, which is something I've not really done yet, strikes me that these 4 songs are all about love, but none of them are about love that goes well, really, which I don't know what that says about my life, but there we go.
So, what inspires you to write music?
Yeah, that's a great question. Don't really know. Honestly, don't really know. Um, it's an odd sensation. And I think any songwriter or any creative person, I'm sure you'll be familiar with this. You just have this urge to do it, and you're not quite sure where it comes from, but suddenly something seems to materialize. And I've played with different approaches to songwriting a lot over the past few years to try and find a strategy that works. Sometimes you have this irresistible urge just to sit down and do something, and sometimes you don't, and you have to kind of chip away at it a little bit and put yourself through your paces. I read a great book recently by the producer Rick Rubin, who talks about creativity and songwriting a lot. And I've tried to follow his advice a little bit. He says that, you know, if you want to do this as a career, you can't always just be waiting for inspiration to hit you, because what if it doesn't? You've got to find ways of kind of getting yourself into that inspired place by yourself. So what I've been trying to do recently is just make sure that every day I sit down with a guitar or at the piano for at least half an hour and just see what comes. And if nothing comes, then I don't beat myself up about it, because that can be really counterproductive as well. I just get up and go about my day. And if something does come, then great. You know, I'm very excited then to sit with it and try and develop it. And often you can then look back up at the clock and realize you've been sat there for 3 hours. And even then, you know, sometimes you won't get anything that you like. Or you'll write a song and then you'll put it away and you'll think, right, I've got that out of my system, but actually I never want to use it again. It's a funny old thing. I can't really explain it. I imagine, like a lot of our behaviors, the vast majority of it is done in the dark of our subconscious. And we don't even know when it's happening. It's probably happening while we sleep, while we brush our teeth, while we drive to work. And then you're sort of just hoping that you can get yourself into that spot where whatever's been percolating down there in the depths has the opportunity to bubble up and burst into real life.
So, are you writing any new music in the near future?
God, yeah, I'm always writing music. I can't stop, which is kind of a blessing and a curse sometimes. Obviously, I love it, but it is really frustrating occasionally. And you sort of get these ideas stuck in your brain and then when you can't make them work, it can be very frustrating. And also you've got that inner critic to contend with all the time. I find that, you know, I'll start writing something, I'll get to the end of a verse, and the voice in my head will go, well, this is no near as good as Bridge Over Troubled Water. And, you know, what a pointless thing to say. It isn't so unhelpful, but you can't stop it, unfortunately. You just got to learn to ignore it, I suppose, or laugh at it is often a good solution. So yeah, I'm heading back into the studio in a couple of weeks with 10 new songs to record an album with a band, which I'm really, really excited about. So I imagine it'll be a long process over the next, I'm hoping 5 or 6 months, no longer if I can do anything about it. So yeah, there'll be new music coming early 2024, I'm hoping.
So, well, I think you're an independent artist, aren't you?
Yeah.
So, can you tell me how does it feel for you being an independent artist in the world that we live in these days?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I suppose it's double-edged sword. So I like the fact that I can do whatever I want and that I'm in charge completely of my own music, my own content, my own image. I can release things on my time scale. I can do what I like, which is great. Obviously, you have no help. So that is the downside. So everything has to be self-funded, self-managed, self-executed. Luckily for me, I have this background in the real world, right? So for 8 years, I was a secondary school teacher and I was sort of in a leadership position by the end of my career in teaching. So I am kind of pretty good at getting things done. Like I am quite an organized person. I have a pretty strong work ethic. I'm good at keeping track of a diary. I'm good at planning projects. So I don't find it terribly stressful, but God knows some people did. Also, it's a bit of a learning process. So as an independent artist, you don't really have a blueprint when you begin of kind of this is how it works, this is what you do, this is how you record music, this is how you release it, this is how you publicize it. So I found that the last couple of years, I've just made a series of really useful mistakes. And when I say that, I mean mistakes that have taught me how to do it better next time, which is why mistakes are always so important. So I've hired some terrible publicity companies, which I'll never hire again. I've wasted money on Facebook ads that don't work. I've put pointless stuff on Instagram stories that will never be seen. I've experimented with fonts and images that aren't good. But hopefully, every time I do that, it brings me a little bit closer to that North Star of what is good and what is going to work. And it's an ongoing process and always will be. But it's quite satisfying seeing something develop and coalesce and become a higher resolution version of what you always wanted it to be. So I'm enjoying being an independent artist, though on some days you do feel like, oh God, I wish somebody would just wave a magic wand and make all of this happen for me. That's the truth.
You have a dream to become signed, or will you stay as you are, as independent?
It's a really great question. I mean, I've never been asked, so God knows what I would do if I was. I think it would certainly depend a lot on context. Um, I like to think I would never even consider signing over my masters or the work itself. I don't think that's something I would ever want to do. I say that, but obviously it's easy to be principled and high-minded, isn't it, when you're in the safe space of your own living room talking hypothetically about anything. So that's what I like to think. The advantage of being signed, obviously, is that you have a team that work with you and they're able to put you in the right places, hopefully connect you with the right people. So listen, I'd be lying if I said no. I'd definitely think about it pretty carefully, but I like to think it would depend on the nature of the deal. And I know plenty of people that have signed to record labels and it's done absolutely nothing for them. And if anything, it's held them back. Because if a label signs you but then doesn't fancy you, it can stop you releasing music, right? Which is something I think that would cause me a great deal of unhappiness, especially at my age, because I'm not 19, right? I'm in my 30s, which I like to think it probably makes me too old to be taken seriously in some sense, but I also like to think it gives me a bit of perspective on life. And so I understand that nothing is ever going to be a silver bullet. Nothing is ever going to be as good as it sounds. So you've always got to look at it in the round and think a little more prosaically about what you really want. And because I intend to do this for the rest of my life, that's the plan. So all I need it to be is sustainable. That's all I want, sustainability. I just want to be able to have a life where I live by making music, right? That's it. I don't want to be Harry Styles. That's it. So if I can figure that out, then I'm good.
And I think the contract needs to be on your terms.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course it does. Yeah. And it needs to recognize the fact that, you know, I want to do different things in music. I want to experiment. I'm not going to change the way I write because I don't think you can. And yeah, you're absolutely right. So it'd depend very much on context and the specifics of what it was.
So, can you tell me what gigs you got coming up? I know you do quite a few gigs.
Well, I do a lot of cover gigs, is what I do, because that's the way that I'm funding all of this. So since I left teaching, I'm gigging all the time, but it's cover work. So in terms of original gigs where you can come and see me and the Restless Dream playing original music, which is what we want to do, which is what we love. We've got a run over at the Great British Food Festival, which has been really fun. We've done 4 of them so far this summer, and we've got a couple more coming up at Wentworth Woodhouse in Sheffield and at Arley in Cheshire. And then I like to try and get around and play a lot of independent music nights in Manchester. You can often catch me at the Whiskey Jar if you're a Manchester local, which is a fantastic night of independent music that runs every Tuesday and Wednesday. And in Stockport at the Petersgate Tap, which is a similar thing. But for those listeners who might be interested in coming to see the band, the best way is to head to our website, which is robjonesandtherestlessdream.com, and ping your email address into the sign-up box. And then every week I send out a bit of a blog in which I just write about something that's kind of occurred to me that week. And I always keep people up to date on that with news. So gig dates, and sort of exclusive content, really, behind the scenes video, first looks at new songs, all that sort of business. So that's the best way to figure that out.
Now, what other social media are you on?
Facebook and Instagram, and I do have a TikTok account, but I've got to tell you, I can't really bear to look at it. So it exists, but I don't really pay any attention to it. So Facebook and Instagram are the major ones.
Thank you for being chatting to you today, the player. Cut So Deep, taken from your new EP out on the 22nd of August called Trees. So thank you for chatting to me today. Bob Jones and Restless Dream.
Thank you, mate. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.